Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to unpack complex ideas, cut through the noise, and really get to what matters. And today, we're taking a deep dive into a phrase that's so common, it almost vanishes. Boys will be boys. Sounds innocent, right? Just a casual way to talk about kids being energetic or maybe a bit mischievous. But what we found when we dug into the sources is, well, there's this whole complex cultural, historical, and even psychological story hiding underneath. So our mission today is to explore where this seemingly simple phrase came from, uncover its layers of meaning, and figure out why understanding it is actually pretty crucial right now. It's about seeing something familiar in maybe a new light.
Exactly. And we'll be dissecting both the literal meaning and, maybe more importantly, the implied meanings, the ones that carry the weight. We'll trace it back through history, through culture, to really get a handle on how it shaped things like gender norms and societal accountability. What really struck me in the research was just how deeply embedded it became, almost like you said, a social permission slip.
Yeah. So let's start there with that distinction. Literal versus implied. Literally on the surface, boys will be boys. Just suggests, typical boy behavior, energetic, playful.
Competitive, sometimes a bit reckless, maybe.
Right. Think about kids building a fort, getting muddy, maybe a harmless prank that doesn't actually hurt anyone, that kind of thing.
But then there's the immediate pivot, the problematic implied meaning. Our sources show pretty clearly this phrase often acts as a kind of blanket excuse.
An excuse for what, though?
For male behavior that crosses lines. Social lines, moral lines. We found historical examples like way back, even 17th century stuff, where things like public disturbances, minor fights were just sort of shrugged off with this phrase.
Wow, really?
Yeah. It basically normalized oppression, rowdiness. The implication was, oh, that's just how they are. It's natural and changeable.
So not really something you need to hold them accountable for.
Precisely. So when you hear it used dismissively now, maybe think about what situations spring to mind for you. It's often not about harmless play then.
And to really get how it became such a powerful excuse, we need to look back. History, culture.
Definitely. Historically, you see the phrase really blossoming in, well, patriarchal societies, places where men just inherently had more privileges than women. And this whole structure created a kind of tolerance, maybe even an expectation for certain male behaviors.
It wasn't always written down in laws, was it? More like
a deep cultural acceptance.
Yeah.
It just allowed questionable actions by men to be sort of overlooked or minimized.
And our research showed it wasn't just unspoken, right? Literature, media, even old folk tales played a big role.
Oh, absolutely. You see it in those heroic epics glorifying warrior types for being dominant, maybe aggressive.
Or folk tales where the mischievous boy is kind of a charming rogue.
And his antics get excused precisely because he's a boy. That's just how boys are. It weaves this really pervasive narrative.
Yeah, it really does.
And tied into that historical context, manliness got really tangled up with ideas like dominance, physical strength.
Emotional stoicism too, right? Not showing feelings.
Exactly. Boys were pushed to be assertive, competitive. Girls, meanwhile, were expected to be, the opposite, submissive, nurturing. So you end up with this environment where, as our sources put it, male misconduct could just be easily dismissed. It laid all the groundwork.
Which brings us neatly to the psychological and sociological side, how boys are actually socialized. It's pretty striking when you look at it. From really early on, boys and girls often get steered down different paths. Think about toys, games, even what teachers expect in the classroom. It often reinforces those traditional gender roles.
Totally. You see how active, competitive toys are often aimed squarely at boys, while the quieter, maybe nurturing ones are for girls. And it plays out in how behavior is treated, too. Boys might get praised, or at least a chuckle, for being daring or rebellious.
Yeah, pulling some kind of prank.
Right. While girls doing the exact same thing might get told off, be quiet, be gentle. These are really powerful little messages, even if subtle.
And then comes adolescence, and that whole idea of peer pressure kicks in. Our sources talked about how teenage boys often look for validation by, taking risks or being aggressive sometimes. And maybe, deep down, they know they can fall back on that cultural safety net, that boys will be boys idea.
It's almost like this unspoken agreement, isn't it? Like, we can push these boundaries because, society often lets us.
Yeah.
And this leads to a really profound sociological point the research brought up. This whole mindset actually limits boys' emotional development.
How so?
Well, it actively discourages things like empathy, showing vulnerability, even just open communication about feelings.
Ah, okay.
So basically traps boys in this really narrow version of masculinity, one where strength means not showing emotion, maybe being dominant. And that harms them and it harms others too.
It's like a blueprint for limitation, not really freedom.
Exactly.
So it's not just about what the phrase excuses, what it actively prevents boys from developing. Interesting. But we should be fair. Let's talk about the spectrum of use. It's not always negative, right?
No, that's true. We should acknowledge the less harmful side.
Sometimes it genuinely does just refer to harmless stuff. Pranks that are actually funny and don't hurt anyone. Or just rough and tumble play. Kids being loud at a game.
Sure. Harmless high spirits. But the danger zone is when it gets applied to situations involving actual harm, violence, sexual harassment, bullying.
That's where it gets really problematic.
That's where it gets serious, because when society starts accepting that kind of conduct as just natural for boys, well, it completely undermines accountability. It reinforces what some sources called a cycle of impunity. Bad behavior happens, it gets excused, there are no real consequences, so it happens again.
And that's the cycle we need to break.
That's the cycle.
So let's look at the real-world impact, the case studies. This is where it kind of hits home. We've all seen how this dismissive attitude plays out, especially recently. Our sources pointed to, well, numerous scandals, politics, entertainment.
Oh, yeah. High-profile cases of sexual harassment, sports violence, corporate bullying situations.
And often, underneath it all, you find this lingering boys will be boys attitude. Maybe not said out loud, but it's there as the justification that allowed it to go on for so long.
And this isn't new. It echoes that historical leniency we talked about, even in legal systems. You can trace a pattern where male offenders in, say, domestic violence or sexual assault cases were treated more leniently, sometimes explicitly citing cultural norms as a factor. Systemic blind spots, really.
But thankfully, there's pushback now, a counter-movement.
Definitely.
Progressive movements are challenging this mindset head-on. Campaigns like #MeToo, for example.
Hugely impactful.
They've really shown a light on how these dismissive attitudes, often tied to this phrase, basically enable systemic abuse by keeping victims quiet.
Absolutely. It created environments where speaking out was incredibly difficult or
Yeah.
seemed pointless. And alongside that activism, you're seeing changes on a more formal level, too. Educational reforms, new workplace codes of conduct.
Things are slowly starting to redefine what's acceptable behavior, setting clearer boundaries, clearer consequences.
It's a gradual shift, but it's happening.
So thinking about this, what does it mean for you listening right now? It's worth considering how this simple phrase helps perpetuate gender inequality. It sends this subtle, or not so subtle message, that maybe men's actions aren't always subject to the same scrutiny.
Which contributes to a culture where victims might feel they can't speak up or won't be believed.
And ultimately, as one source put it, it discourages young men from developing moral responsibility. It gives them an easy out when maybe they should be learning from consequences.
Which leads us to, okay, what do we do? How do we challenge this stereotype? Well, the core solution seems to involve actively redefining masculinity, expanding it to really embrace qualities like empathy, respect, accountability.
That sounds fundamental.
It really is.
And that redefinition, it has to start early, doesn't it? Parents, teachers, even people creating movies or TV shows, they all have a role in resisting that urge to just use the phrase uncritically, to excuse things. Instead, maybe guiding and teaching.
Yes. And it connects to bigger systemic changes, too. Things like gender sensitivity training in schools, helping kids understand healthy interactions from the start, and making sure our laws are applied fairly. Treating male and female offenders equally, ensuring justice is consistent.
No easy passes based on gender.
Exactly. But what's also crucial, truly essential, is that men themselves need to be part of this. Rejecting those harmful stereotypes, calling out inappropriate behavior when they see it among their peers.
Taking responsibility within their own circles.
Precisely.
Okay, so let's try to find a balanced perspective here as we wrap up. This isn't about demonizing boys or, normal boyish energy.
Not at all. It's about nuance. While we absolutely have to reject the harmful misuse of the phrase, it's also okay to acknowledge that there might be some genuine developmental differences between genders without falling into that trap of biological determinism.
What do you mean by that?
Yeah.
Biological determinism.
Just the idea that biology dictates everything, that our genes lock us into certain behaviors rather than acknowledging the complex dance between biology and social learning, culture, everything else.
Got it. So acknowledge differences, but don't use them as an excuse.
Right. And here's where the positive can come in. Boys often do have incredible energy, curiosity, competitiveness.
Yeah, things that can be really valuable.
Absolutely. And those traits can be harnessed positively in sports, driving innovation, in leadership,
Provider.
provided they're guided by strong values,
Mm.
respect, fairness, empathy. It's not about crushing their spirit, it's about channeling it responsibly.
Encouraging accountability alongside everything else.
Exactly. Accountability, respect, empathy, that's the goal. So look, in the 21st century, we really can't afford to just treat boys will be boys as some harmless old saying anymore. Our deep dive shows it's packed with a heavy, often problematic history, and it really demands we look at it with fresh eyes.
Yeah. Ultimately, the phrase either needs a serious redefinition, focusing only on the truly harmless stuff, or maybe it just needs to be retired. We need to build a society where everyone, truly everyone, is held accountable for their actions, regardless of their gender.
And maybe a final thought to leave you with. True progress isn't about pretending differences don't exist. It's about making absolutely sure those differences never become an excuse for inequality or a shield against accountability.
So as you go about your day, maybe just pause and consider, what does it really mean to foster a culture of empathy, responsibility, and mutual respect? How do we move beyond these outdated stereotypes and build something, well, more just for everyone?